Okay, everybody, I've got the sign from the control booth and we are ready to get started on what will be our last sit, listen and learn session of this budget season. And the next meetings we have will be when the fun really starts. So as usual, I ask you to be crisp because we will be having an executive session. There are a couple of personnel issues involving named employees that have an impact on our budget decisions, and we will be discussing those later. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to do a presentation for admin, and that can be found on page 4-23 of your budget books.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Okay. So good evening, everyone. And I'm going to go through the county administration's 2023 budget proposal. I'm actually this is going to be broken down into 3 sections. I'll try to make everything crisp. So we'll start with the county administration department's budget, then some other components of the budget under which fall, county administration has responsibilities for, and then I'll conclude with the capital plan. So starting with the administration budget, county administration is broken out into 5 divisions, if you will, with separate accounting units. So under county administration, that includes myself and 2 deputies, budget director and budget analyst and confidential secretary. Then under communications includes our communications director and our media productions assistant. Under equity and diversity, it's a separate funding line, and that includes our chief equity diversity officer. Our risk manager risk management includes our county risk manager, who also coordinates contracts and is the county's compliance officer. And then the Community Justice Center, which heads up the Reimagining Public Safety, coordinates those efforts. That includes our CJC director, data analyst, and administrative assistant. Okay. The budget responsibilities under county administration department includes the whole budget, but it also includes in detail the county administration department's budget, the contingent fund, insurance reserve, unallocated revenues, and the American Rescue Plan Act or ARPA funds, as well as the capital budget. So those are all of the components that I'm going to be touching upon in my presentation, but I'll jump right into the county administration's departmental budget. Our 2022 adopted budget was about 2.4 million. Our modified 2022 budget included negotiated wage increases, bringing it up to about 2.58 million. Many of our OTRs last year were 3-year one-time OTRs, which is why you'll be seeing them again in 2023. Our 2023 target budget was 1.44 million, and we have a little over $1 million in over target requests. So our 2023 recommended budget is about the same or just slightly under last year's request. Our revenue figures have changed somewhat, and that's mostly due to the use of ARPA funds versus fund balance. And so our full-time equivalents, they are the same as they were for the 2022 budget. We have 9 positions in our target budget. Then we have the Community Justice Center positions and the media production assistant position. They're all 3-year one-time requests for a total of 4.5. It differs slightly from what's in your budget book, but this is accurate. So 9 in target and 13.5 requested recommended. And then jumping right into our over target requests, we're first requesting $80,000 in target funding to upgrade the county's budget software. It's really hard to overstate the need for this investment, not only for the budget preparation, but for overall budget management by both county administration as well as individual departments managing their budgets. Currently, the budget software that we're using is more of a system to produce the budget book rather than a budget management system. So we're currently, we have the choice now narrowed down between a couple of vendors, and it's going to be a system that integrates with our financial system as well as our HR payroll system, which is very important. Last year, the legislature approved the use of $100,000 in departmental rollover for use in 2022 to cover the transition and installation costs. And we've been working with the ITS department and finance department all year on the larger steps of the budgeting and finance process. Norma has been assembling a team of departmental representatives who have been looking at the various software options, and we're prepared to begin this transition before the end of this year. So that's the first over target request. The second is a continuation of last year's over target request, which was a multi-year language access project to improve the accessibility to constituents through the translation of the county's website to multiple languages. During the height of COVID, we learned through our community partners that critical health information was not easily or readily available to community members in their native languages. And the same is true for other critical information that's put out by the county. For instance, voting information, road closures, program eligibility, et cetera. So we're currently midstream with this project in 2022. It's been supported with ARPA funding, and Dominic can provide further information on the status of this, but we're midstream. The third request is for one-time funding to continue to run our current budget software in parallel with the new system until it's fully operational, after which time we don't anticipate needing that contract any further. Fourth, over target request may seem out of place, but I can explain why. This is a project, a multi-year project, which was funded last year through the legislature to support the Sunflower House. And it was broken out into 3 different components. The first was to fund OAR for a housing manager, and that came through the Human Services Coalition's budget request. The second component was to fund one-time INHS for one-time capital improvements. So that was funded in 2022 and is not needed for 2023. And the third component of the Sunflower House project was to fund Ultimate Reentry Opportunity, or URO, for $35,000. $15,000 for participant programming and $20,000 for program evaluation and data analysis. So this over target request was in the budget for cooperative extension until early 2022, when URO moved to the Center for Transformative Action. So URO moved from CCE to CTA. And we tracked this contract, and it ended up in our budget this year. So this is the second year of the 3-year request to fund this component of the Sunflower House project. And I would anticipate that next year, if funded, we would move it to under HSC, but this year it just wound up in our budget as to track. The next over target request is the second of a 3-year one-time request to fund a media productions assistant to staff the filming and streaming of legislature and committee meetings, as well as video production in departments and photography. And of course, this position took the place of the former contract and with Cooperative Extension and Jim Blizzard after he retired. Then the next over target request for $20,200 is the second of a 3-year one-time request to continue the Gov delivery software to produce email newsletters for county business. We have 15 departments that are actively using this software to send e-newsletters and updates for everything from health department advisories to Board of Elections updates to highway construction, legislature highlights. We have approximately 40,000 subscribers in total. And in this era when people consume their news and media through a scattershot of places, this is one outlet that's proving to be an effective means of reaching our community with what's happening with the county. So I have one more page of our over target requests. The next request is a program budget for diversity, equity, and inclusion operating support. And this is meant to establish a program budget to support DEI initiatives for the county workforce, giving the Chief Equity Diversity Officer a budget to work with to purchase program materials, books, support for conferences, training for the workforce. And then the remaining over target requests are the second year funding for reimagining public safety initiatives under the Community Justice Center. We recently went over these, the 2023 reimagining plans at the public safety meeting, and Mona Smiley, our CJC director, also presented them to Common Council. The amounts listed here include only the county's expenses. An equivalent amount the city will be paying for, but they include the staffing for the Community Justice Center positions. The first OTR listed, that includes the CJC director, data analyst, and part-time administrative assistant. The next is funding for the evaluation of the alternative response pilot program with the mental health and law enforcement, as well as piloting community resource hubs in rural areas. The next is funding to work on standardizing data entry, including efforts to professionally organize the existing data sets used by law enforcement and to develop standardized data entry training and documentation for law enforcement personnel, and to execute that training annually. Then the next is to fund a community dashboard to purchase a module in the existing system, which would allow for the real-time data integration needed for a user interface for the public to see information as well as to input information for the community dashboard. And then finally, a request for funding toward an officer wellness program to be developed in coordination with law enforcement officers and leadership to provide mental and physical wellness supports to ensure that the health of our officers and trauma-informed care due to the high-stress nature of their roles. So I think this is probably a good place for a pause to see if there are any questions about anything that I've covered so far.
Okay, this is your chance. Questions? Annie?
Thank you for the presentation. I know it's a lot of different stuff. I'm just wondering if you don't have an answer now, that's okay, but just wondering how many of these, for instance, staffing, officer wellness, that you would anticipate in the next year or two going to target versus OTRs?
That's a great question. And I would also invite Dominic and Mona to chime in if you have ideas. I think it depends on each of the plans themselves. I think some of them, once they are fully realized and adopted, a component of them may become target funding. And for instance, the second one here, the alternative response model, part of that is for evaluation of a program. So I think that would, the funding here would only be to evaluate whether what we're implementing is effective or not, whether or not we want to continue the funding. I could try to get back to you with some more, a better answer to that, but I think that it's going to depend on each of the plans themselves.
I mean, I'm thinking only if other legislators are also interested. I know you're in the midst of a lot of different things. If people are also wanting that information, maybe not. Down the road, doesn't have to be right now.
Yeah, I kind of think we're treading unfamiliar ground and it's a little soon to know. Okay. Mike.
Noticed 14 OTRs from your department. They're all recommended. But I did have a question on Community Justice Center. Which of those are the city contributing to? And this is just our share, I assume.
Correct. I think that the city is contributing an equal half to all of these. That's correct. Yep.
All of them then? Yep. Thank you.
Or it's under review right now by Common Council for their funding.
Yeah, my understanding was that they were going to consider that at their October meeting.
Yes.
Does anybody else have a question? Greg?
Yeah, just a quick question. This just may be procedural. The media production streaming operations, why is that in a one time as a multi-year and not target? I feel like that's probably going to be the normal going forward, or is the normal now?
Yes, that would be our hope. It has not been a staff responsibility until this year when we began it, and we wanted to do the 3-year ramp up before absorbing it into target. But that certainly would be our hope and would be the new norm.
What's the benefit to doing that?
The benefit is that it is when we can't fit everything under the tax levy.
Got it.
Shauna?
I had a question about the sunflower houses. I understand we're in year 2 of a 3-year. Is it expected that after we go through the 3-year that they would have the funding needed from a different source in order to continue the services?
That would be a question I would have to pose to Tully in that program. This portion of their OTR is only for the evaluation, so it's not the case management that would be under OAR.
Okay, so OAR are we doing that separate? Or was that in Human Services Coalition?
That was under Human Services Coalition.
So what are we evaluating with this 35,000? Is this something that we're going to have to evaluate forever, or is it going to stop after 3 years?
I believe it would stop after 3 years,
Okay,
or that would be absorbed into their way of doing business.
okay.
It's to collect the results-based accountability measures.
Okay, yeah, good to know. Anybody else? Oh, I'd just like to say that I think that $119,000 we're spending on Rob's position is money well spent. Thank you, Rob. And I do have a question. Your OTR number 3, the 80,000 in target for the budget software application, is this like an annual fee that we have to pay?
That's, yes, OTR number, yes, that would be the ongoing cost of the budget software, because it's hosted in the cloud and. so-
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to ask for every piece of software because I really don't understand how software
Yes.
works.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. All right then, if there are no further questions, we will, oh, Rich.
I'd been holding one, and I apologize for being late this evening. Insurance reserve, I don't know where that one goes. Can I ask a question about that during county administration?
Sure, I'm coming to it
Oh, I'll wait.
next, yes.
Okay.
Okay, Lisa, go ahead.
It's a great segue, thank you, Rich. All right.
Totally lucky.
You're a great straight man.
So these next 5 slides or so cover other budgeting areas that are the responsibility of county administration, so that you're all fully aware of the various components in the 2023 budget. So the first being the contingent fund. We mentioned just at a recent meeting that I've increased the contingent fund to 1.2 million for 2023 to better reflect the county's needs in a given year. So that's contingent fund. This next slide reflects the broad category known as unallocated revenue, which include casino revenue, clerk's fees, legal settlements, use of fund balance, sales tax, and an other category, which is a potpourri. So the slide is meant to show the details of the increases that were made in the budgeting process between the target assumptions I brought to you in April and the recommended budget produced in September. We had 43 million budgeted in unallocated revenue in 2022. In April, I projected the target to be 47 million. And based on further information that we received on actual casino revenues to date, we further increased that projection by another 1.2 million, as well as on the advice of the county clerk, increased the clerk's fees anticipated revenue by another 200,000. So in all, we're talking about a 5.48 projected increase in unallocated revenue for 2023. So.
Just to clarify, unallocated though is highly allocated,
Yes, it
Okay.
goes to fund,
just for those watching at home.
yes, it funds everything that we've been talking about for these past several meetings. Okay, and then oh, yes.
Oh, sorry, Rich. I'm trying to keep track myself.
It seems like we've taken a position where we're expecting more revenue from several different sources and pretty significant changes. And I know historically we've been underestimating. If, for example, the housing market does not continue as it is, it seems like the clerk's fees deed transfers are not going to be anywhere near where they've been. We've been in what seems to be a boom. I don't know. It just seems we're being pretty optimistic. But
We discussed that with the county clerk, and she felt that this was realistic without being overly optimistic.
and the same thing with casino. Because that's,
The casino revenues, when we looked at the history to date since COVID, they have come in a little bit higher than what we're projecting. So this seems, again, realistic without, we're having to make the determination whether we want to try to, we keep accumulating fund balance, and what we're trying to do, or what this budget is trying to do, is come in
on budget.
or hopefully slightly below.
Yeah. So much of our sales tax comes from sale of cars. And if you drive by the lots, a lot of them are empty. They don't have cars to sell. And I'm wondering, again, are we being over optimistic? And I think we have enough fund balance that we can right size in 2024. But okay,
The sales tax revenue is, I feel, relatively cautious. It looked at our actuals for 2021, which have come in, our 2022 to date have come in higher than 2021. So we're looking at 2021 actuals plus the diversions that have been put back into the county that we're assured of getting in 2023 from the state. So
we have to pick numbers. It's just, we're okay. Well,
I think this is a particularly difficult year.
very,
Because
very.
we're dealing with these macroeconomic and geopolitical factors that have huge impacts potentially on so many pieces of our budget, and we have no control over them and we can't predict them. So, yeah.
Well, I've also been reading that because of COVID and all of the relief programs, savings are way up, but people have been spending them, and a lot of people are spending down their savings.
Kind of like we are with our fund balance.
Maybe. Yeah, it'll be an interesting year, 2023.
yes, indeed.
Thanks.
That's one word for it. Okay, I've got Mike and then Randy.
Yeah, Lisa, you made a comment, and I'd really like to underscore that. By raising these revenues and not underestimating them as much, we will have less to put in the fund balance. And if these revenues don't come in, we will have spent fund balance because we didn't get enough revenue. So when folks are out there thinking about our fund balance and thinking there's a whole lot of money to spend, you got to be very, very careful in this budget that you proposed because it may or may not be there.
Thanks, Mike. Randy.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where we end up on the clerk fees and detransfers. I kind of agree with Rich on that one. But as far as unallocated revenues, so the casino licensing money received, is any of that supposed to be allocated towards gambling as an addiction, or is it just go into the general fund?
It goes into the general fund. Or, I mean, we're budgeting for it for county programs and services, but there is no specific
No requirement.
program.
Okay, I'm
Correct.
just curious.
Yeah.
Okay, we ready to move on?
Yes, but I just want to acknowledge everyone's comments here. And I do think that this has been an attempt, after receiving a lot of input and feedback, particularly from the legislature, about how much we have been underspending, and we need to better utilize the resources, the tax revenues that we're collecting, and not accumulate fund balance, while at the same time not put ourselves in a precarious situation. So this tries to walk that line. Okay. The insurance reserve. So this is, we had been budgeting for many years right around 543,000. I've looked at the last few years of the actual claims experience, and it's closer to 627,000. And so we included that change in the target for this year. Does that get at your question, Rich?
I was just curious how we seem to have fairly consistent expenditures out of our insurance over 2021, 22. And that seemed odd that we'd have insurance claims that were fairly predictable, was all.
So is this a reserve so that we self-insure for certain things? So in that sense, it's not very predictable.
But it's come in right around, yeah, to your point.
Yeah.
Just slightly higher than what we had, when I looked at the last, I think it was 3 to 4 years or 4 to 5 years. This was the average claim experience. And so that's what we budgeted.
Mike?
Is there any money built up in there, or have we spent it all each year?
I don't know the answer to that. Do you, Norma?
I was not, I was just checking, no, I'm sorry. I was just checking that and I'm not sure of that either, the insurance reserve. So we'll get an answer for that.
What rabbit hole would that fall down if we didn't use it all? Is this another addition to our fund balances? That I guess that's a question for future reference. Thanks.
Okay. So the last piece I wanted to touch upon before we get to capital is the American Rescue Plan Act funds. And the county administration has been tracking and reporting the use of the ARPA funds, U.S. Treasury, and our budget analyst, Samantha Freilich, has become our resident expert on ARPA. So just for everyone's information, Tompkins County received $19.8 million in ARPA funding. And as you can see thus far, we've committed approximately 42% of that funding to capital projects, 32% to the Community Recovery Fund program that was originally scheduled for the capital program, and 25% of those funds to operating through the budgeting process that have gone to one-time expenses. And in 2023, there are a number of one-time over target requests supported by ARPA across a number of different departments and agencies. You can see here many different county departments as well as community agencies we're supporting with ARPA for one-time expenses. It's another good place for me to pause if there are questions before I jump into the capital budget.
I think Amanda has a question.
Well, just, can you send us this slide or document that shows this? That'd be great. Thanks.
Greg?
Do you know what the total amount of, because these are all, it's not all of these are staffing, but a lot of them are staffing, right? Handful?
Some of them are one-time.
So will these then come back as one-time OTRs when ARPA runs out?
Or under the fund balance.
Yeah.
Yes. Or they either
Or
they're,
there'll be target requests at some point?
Or they'll disappear. I
or
mean,
they'll disappear. Some of them are, for instance, staffing for a position for 6 months for a transition, a
Okay.
staffing transition or a retirement. So
Got it. And do you have a total of the OTRs supported by ARPA? Dollar value?
certainly do. I don't know if I have it at my fingertips.
Okay.
we could probably move along while Norma's looking for that.
Next piece would be jumping into capital. Shall I go?
Yeah, it's all related.
What's that? Yes?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So, on to the capital program. So in the 2023 budget, I've recommended $1 million increase to the capital contributions for many of the reasons I've already outlined to you all. We know the increased cost of materials, the number of projects we're committed to, and to support the airport as we go through a period of recovery in air service after COVID. So the contribution to the capital plan represents 14% of the property tax levy, and the total contribution is 7.38 million. This is a look outward at our capital obligations and our proposed use of fund balance to support the capital program over the next 5 years or so. You'll notice the increase in our new net obligations peaking around 2026, which assumes an investment in a new downtown center of government building and where the debt service would begin there. It also illustrates that we are going to need to look at carefully at the costs of that facility and our capacity to support it and the possible use of fund balance toward that facility. Before I get into each of the capital projects, it's significant to state what the current capital plan doesn't include. And this year it does not include a planned airport rescue and firefighting SRE building, which was $19.4 million total. There was going to be a 5.3 million local share supported through passenger facilities charges. And the FAA's airport master plan had scoped this project out and had already committed some planning funds for it. The FAA says that we need this building, but they're allowing us to defer it, understanding that the costs, understanding where we're at with airport revenues and expenditures currently. The capital plan currently does not include the cost of the construction of a new jail facility, and it does not include refined costs of a center of government building, which we have yet to enter into the design phase for. So the $30 million amount was included in the capital plan. That was last year's amount that has been carried over as a placeholder. And when we get into the design phase, we will know those costs. So onto the capital projects by department, and starting with the airport. We have a number of projects already underway as part of the airport's master plan. Most of these projects receive significant funding through the federal government, where there is a 90% share and then a 5% state share and a 5% local share funded through passenger facility charges, or PFCs. So those are the, I think 10 or 11 airport projects that are planned for 2023, several of which are currently underway or in stages. Next is the Department of Emergency Response. This includes communications equipment that's critical for the Department of Emergency Response operations at the tower sites. The equipment at the towers has a life cycle, and items such as a battery backup replacement and it needs to be budgeted. We've experienced some unexpected battery failures in the last year. And so this plan now takes that scheduled replacement into account, as well as scheduled maintenance of generators and roof repair and maintenance at each of the tower sites. Next is Board of Elections voting machines. We're expecting to the need to replace 50 voting machines in 2024. So this is a placeholder for that. Each machine costs approximately $12,500. Won't be seeing that in 2023, but it's on the horizon for 2024, which also will be a next are facilities improvements to address the ongoing maintenance and restoration across all county facilities and address deferred maintenance. We're allocating $1.4 million annually toward our facilities maintenance and improvements. Next is the Green Facilities Project. County has made it a priority to reduce emissions in our operations and our buildings. Phase 1 of the Green Facilities Project has been reworked to result in a countywide carbon reduction of 40% after phase 1. So we know the costs of these projects have increased, but the projects themselves have been adjusted to result in that greater reduction and a pause on phases 2 and 3. So that is a total of 14.4 million. As I'd mentioned, the downtown campus, we're still in the plan to consider a center of government building downtown to meet the space needs of county departments and get several departments out of leased space. We committed $3 million toward the purchase of those downtown properties this year with design work to occur in the near future. Construction would be slated potentially for 2024. Highway machinery, again, accounting for the need for future expenditures to replace aging highway equipment. We're looking out over a 5-year period for that. Highway road program. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with this, but this is a 5-year plan for local funding to maintain and improve the overall pavement quality of our roads and bridges. And then various highway projects which are funded with state and federal funding where we pay a local share.
You would go back.
Sure.
It looks like the local share in 2024 is radically different. 4 million, are those transposed?
No, I believe what we've done, these are the projects under which we had originally budgeted, correct me if I'm wrong, Norma, ARPA funding. Is that correct?
These are not the ones that we.
Norma, use your, that's okay. It's easy to forget.
This is Lisa's thing. Yes, no, those are projects that are coming on in 2024. Those are local funds. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a full $4.4 million outlay. It could be bonded. That those decisions have not been made, but those are the costs of the projects coming on in 2024.
Highway projects.
Highway projects.
That we don't yet have grants for. Right. And we may or may not get grants for those, or we definitely won't.
Probably.
Be a good question for our highway manager who's probably on.
Well, Mike, we just went over some of these and F&I.
That's right.
For instance, it was talked about, sorry if I could chime in.
Oh, go.
For instance,
go
like
ahead.
the Podunk Road Bridge, we have to bond for that and then wait for reimbursement later. So
Yeah.
most of this we get, or a good chunk, good portion we get reimbursed for later, but we have to have the money available to outlay for it.
And why do 25 and 26 look in line with 23 and previous? Wouldn't we see the same thing there where you'd have gigantic numbers?
So on the highway department has laid those out on their PAR forms, how those funds are going to come. So the funds will come out further out in the capital project, where we'll have less local funding and more federal grants. It just depends on the project. If it's a bridge, I don't know. I was just looking to see if Jeff was on. If it's a bridge, it's going to get more funding, federal funding than some of the other projects.
Maybe we could save that question for later because Jeff is supposed to be on the
Yes, that's
roster.
I am here.
Oh, hey, Jeff,
I
can
might
you
be here.
answer those questions now?
Steps in it.
Yeah, so a couple of questions, I think. The only project of the four that you see that is not supported by Bridge New York or other funding off the tip is the Cortlandt Street. That's the only one that's locally funded. And the way that the chart is presented, it doesn't show a real like value of what we're getting back. If you had each project in front of you, it would better tell the story. Those are just totals for each year and what we expect in federal funding versus what our local cost is. For instance, 2024, a big chunk of that is federally funded, but it's not that year because we're not expecting it that year the way it was broke out in the PAR form. It'll be coming, it'll be moving forward when we get into the heavier construction phases of the projects.
So that would be in 2025 and 2026?
That's what I expect. Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't seen this chart, so I can't exactly speak to it, but I know that looking at the four projects above, the 1.6 million is local cost. Excuse me, but the Fall Creek is I think 95% funded. Falls Road Bridge to Gannett Creek is not funded at this point, but we're going to continue to anticipate it, and the funding for that is out years, so we're not necessarily starting to expend any funding on that. We have multiple applications out for that Falls Road Bridge for various funding sources right now through some of the multimodal type federal grant programs. There's two separate applications that are in place right now. And then Podunk is a Bridge New York project that is moving forward, and that's 95% funded.
Okay, so Falls Road Bridge is a big one. That's $4.9 million right there. So that
Sure.
makes sense. Rich, I saw your hand and then Annie.
Yeah, so we're going to use bands or bonding. So we're not going to look at a gigantic budget bump in 24 that would wreck our budget.
Correct.
Yeah, we're going to use bands. Typically we use bands and then we don't actually bond or we decide to use reserve or some other to pay the project the local share at the end in full.
And that local share could change if we get.
Yeah, I
Yes,
think this, when you're planning this far in advance, it's almost inevitable that something's going to change. Hopefully for the better.
All right, I'm not as afraid. Thank you.
Okay.
And part of that, Rich, is in section 3 on page 39, that's that project, the big one that you're referring to.
Yeah, I think Jeff is right. This is a snapshot that doesn't fully capture everything, all of the assumptions behind each of these projects.
Okay, thank you.
Annie?
Thanks. I should disclose that I do live just shy of Podunk Road. So I just want to say that.
Oh, should we postpone this bridge project then?
Then Annie won't be able to get here to meetings.
Then I'll live, right? That'll take me a little longer.
Okay. All right. Can we move on?
Yes. Okay, next we have ITS infrastructure replacement and maintenance. And we're coming to the end of a 5-year planning cycle. In 2024, we will start another one in 2025 with ITS. And these projects, there are multiple projects that support our networks, our phone switching gears, and our servers, et cetera, as well as the countywide centralized computer procurement and replacement that are funded through this ITS infrastructure program. The next one is to the streaming operations and media production. Again, realizing and just wanting to make note that the equipment here in the legislature chambers is in need of maintenance and consolidation for the best use of the system. So this helps to consolidate and integrate the equipment that we have here in the legislature chambers for broadcasts and so forth. These next projects are through the planning department. The Aquifer Study Program is coming to a close. This has been a longtime partnership with the U.S. Geological Survey to look at our watersheds. And that will be coming to a close in 2024. These projects have been paid out of with cash. The Green Fleet Program is again looking to transition the county's fleet to fully electric vehicles by 2030. This centralizes the fleet management under the Chief Sustainability Officer's purview, which is leading to efficiencies in procurement and purchasing and resale. So that's what we're looking at for the next few years with fleet management. The Natural Infrastructure Program, another one through planning, which is a series of projects which mitigate the adverse impacts of climate change, looking at downstream flooding, erosion, sedimentation, et cetera. And then finally, the Recycling and Materials Management Center upgrades. This is broken out into two sets of projects and scheduled improvements, one of which is funded through ARPA funding. That's 1.6 million. And then another set of upgrades, that's a $2.2 million project. Both of which we're coming to the end of this planning cycle. So I think that covers everything with the capital program. Happy to take questions, and most of the departments that have capital plans are with us on the screen if there are further questions related to capital. So I can stop sharing if you like.
Thank you, Lisa. Norma, did you have an
I just have
answer?
answers to a couple of the questions. If you
Please
don't mind.
share.
One of the questions was related to the insurance reserve. We have a little bit more than $1 million in the reserve that carries forward year to year. As for the ARPA funds used for operating expenses, we have almost 5 million, 4.96. Capital is 8.39, and the recovery grant program is 6.5 million. So.
Thank you.
But scheduled for 2023 isn't the 5 million. Some of that was.
Correct.
Correct.
last
Yes.
year.
In the,
Last
I'm sorry. Yeah. In 2023, there's 1.5, almost 1.6. Yep.
Okay, Randy.
Thank you, Lisa. I actually have a lot of questions, but I'm not going to ask them now. But do
Thank
all
you.
of the capital programs go through the Facilities Infrastructure Committee? Is that primarily where all those discussions happen first?
Well, I think Mike,
Asking,
I'm just asking if that's where they all kind of,
Yes.
eventually they will. So
yes,
at
they
some
will.
point, well, I'll see those, so I won't bother.
That's
people.
correct.
Anything after 23 doesn't really matter at this point, really. But I do have a question on the downtown office building. And it says in previous years, you spent $1.8 million in design. Did that actually happen? Was there something?
No, it's not happened. What previous years includes 2022 and the hope or the thought that by the end of 2022 or this last quarter of 2022, we might be looking into the design phase 2022 and 2023.
Not sure it's going to happen, but okay. All right, thanks.
anything else? Anyone else? Mike?
You had the capital slide for the airport. And I don't know whether you can answer it or whether Roxanne should answer it, but there was 0.4 million for some kind of additional work on the canopy. I wondered what that's about.
Roxanne, would you like to take that one?
I would be glad to. So the canopy that was part of the UAI Upstate Airport Initiative grant in 2019 that we received doesn't really work apparently in Northeast airports. We have issues with snow sliding off, which causes a safety concern. So we're having to look at fixing that to make it a safer canopy for out front of the terminal. That's a short answer. I have a great detail, Mike, that I can send you on that with more.
And I do remember you're saying that to the F&I committee before. If I could just make a comment, and that is that the reason we have that canopy is because Governor Cuomo wanted it. It cost what, over $1 million, Roxanne?
I believe it was even more than that, Mike. I'm not quite sure. I think it was like it was definitely over $1 million. Yes.
In my opinion, it's ugly. It ruins the view of our beautiful airport terminal. And I just regret if we have to spend more money on it. If it's for safety, of course we should, but I'd like to
Deconstruct it?
maybe, would Binghamton like to buy it from?
I could sell it to them for say 7
Please.
million. No.
Okay, I've got Shauna and then Greg.
Yeah, I was wondering, as far as some of the projects that we're doing at the airport, I noticed that the PFCs are being used to pay for some of these. And I was wondering if there are any that we have not started that we might be able to put off till the airport gets a little bit more revenue.
Sean, I can absolutely jump in on that. So this is just kind of a plan going out, and so a lot of these may not have been started. They were just in our plan. So we try to plan for at least 5 years with the FAA. And, they have funding that's available to us, but we can also look and work with them. We have a great relationship with our Northeast, people with the FAA. We can move them out if need be. There's certain ones that we can't, like the taxiway for next year. And this year we have to, get those done. It's a mandate. Again, I look at it, so the FAA looks at every airport the same. Now, so me looking at Ithaca, it's completely different than JFK, but when they put in a mandate or a requirement on how a taxiway works, we have to follow that. But yes, we can look at some of these as we go through, depending on how fast our recovery is, if there's things that we can push off. That was a big reason for the ARF SRE building being pushed off. I said, there's absolutely no way I can support doing that at this time. We need to hold off.
Yeah, I'm just concerned because I know that our PFCs, we've tried to also use those for debt fees. And I feel like we're trying to put them towards a lot of different things, and 0 times 0 equals 0.
I agree. And, and I also look at it as, projects that we can push off. And if we have it, so sometimes it may take us longer to collect the PFCs to pay these. So where you would have to ask Rick, Rick will be retiring, but finance to upfront the money and it will be paid back. So we have to, kind of factor that in and look and see, okay, is this project mandated? Do we need to do it? Do we need to maybe borrow the 5% until the PFCs are collected? Because once it's in the application, we will collect it. It just, depends on the recovery and how fast we can collect the fees. I hope that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, Lisa?
And to your point, Shauna, we certainly could look at these projects. The list that are planned does not include probably there are probably 5 or 6 that we also talked about originally and did not make it to this list. So we could do more, but including the RF-SRE building and some other planned projects that we've found.
Okay, thank you. I think we should be discerning about what projects we undertake as the airport struggles through this adjustment to whatever the new normal is going to be in the airline industry. Greg?
I'm looking at a lot of these airport PAR forms, so local contribution other than PFCs is next to zero.
So are our PFCs.
Pardon?
So are the PFCs, right?
No, I get that, but if there's an opportunity to leverage a $17,000 PFC charge for almost $340,000 of state and federal money.
I think we've heard that before, though. Many of the legislators that have been here before have heard that we're not going to have to contribute as much as we have in the past.
So are these pages wrong?
I think we need to enter into future agreements very skeptical.
Yeah, I mean, I think as it's presented, the information we have in front of us, it shows that there's no local contribution other than the PFC, which is essentially our airport revenue, which we're choosing to, spend to support as the local share to these projects.
So, well, and Roxanne can explain further, but let me start by saying the PFCs are generated by emplanements. And when the emplanements have suffered, the PFC revenue suffers. So, and that's the case in the terminal project, which is we have bond payments that are coming due and the amount of the PFCs generated will not be sufficient to cover the bond payments. So that's the predicament that we find ourselves in.
So to Mike's point about the canopy, that $300,000, it's really $17,500 in PFCs or local contribution. The rest is coming from federal or state funds as it's listed in this form. So it seems like they're maybe correcting the governor's mistake through that funding. Is that a way to read that? Because the way we presented it previously is that we're spending $300,000 to fix this canopy, but we're receiving federal and state funds to do that, right?
Yes. Yes. I think that the number of projects and the extent of the bond payment that's coming due for the terminal project, which did include the canopy project as well as others, we're needing to pay for. So I think in the past, perhaps we've entered into this thinking that PFCs with the airport, with the emplanements the way they were, the PFCs were going to cover it and there would not be local cost, but we're finding that there are.
Yeah, and I 100% recognize that, and I can move on from this point. My only point is that the local share of that capital project, if we didn't have the PFC to cover it, would really only be $17,500 because of the federal and state revenue.
Correct.
Okay.
Although we need to bear in mind that we're transferring $1.6 million out of fund balance just for next year.
To cover bond payment.
No, not just to cover bond payment, to also cover operating expenses at the airport.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because PFCs are down.
And I think what also happens is whenever you have politicians that are handing out money, they want things their certain way. And sometimes you don't hear about that whenever you're voting on it. But the canopy was something very specific that Governor Cuomo wanted a certain way, and we had to dish out that money in order for us to have that part of the airport.
And
Yeah, so that, I mean, that
And
ship,
it cost us money.
that ship sailed.
Yep.
But the repair of that is coming from federal, state, and a small amount of local funds.
Listen, I don't think anybody is hinging this entire argument on the cost of repairing that whatever the heck it is, canopy. That's just a drop in the bucket compared to the $13 million that we had to bond for cost overruns that we were not led to expect we were going to have. And then we were going to pay for that debt service with PFCs that we thought we were going to have, but we don't have. So a lot of us are really gun shy.
No, I mean, I understand the current situation, so I appreciate the re-explanation. I'm just saying, as we're talking about the capital program, I just think it's important that as we're talking about it, it's not $300,000 in our project to pay for the repair. There's other funding sources in that. And it's important, I think, in this conversation to point that out so that we have the holistic conversation being had. That was my only point in bringing that up.
Okay.
Because the way that it was framed was a local had to fix it.
Okay, Mike, I saw your hand.
To Shauna's point, I just want to say, you're right, Shauna, but I think you framed it a little bit wrong. And that is the PFCs as projected would have made a much larger payment had it not been for the pandemic. It's the same thing with the chargebacks at TC3, which were being budgeted to pay for capital program. And they haven't turned out to be what was expected either. But it wasn't for lack of the people who were projecting these in the departments not doing their best or overstating. It's just bad luck happened.
No, I agree. I don't think anybody's blaming Roxanne or Bill Talbot or Amy Kremenik for what's going on, but this is the reality we've got to deal with. Randy.
Yes, good discussion. Greg, thanks for asking those questions. I think it'd be a good idea for the facilities department to look at what you prioritized for work and to kind of look at what we think really should push forward. It's just, maybe it's what you already requested, Lisa, but I think we should look at that. So.
Well, I don't think Lisa pulled this out of her left ear. I think she worked pretty closely with facilities to come up with these capital plans and the PARs, right?
I agree with Greg that we're leveraging a lot of money here. So that's great, but I think it's worth another look.
So just to be clear, you're talking about the airport projects. Yeah, so we work with the airport on the airport projects that go through the FAA. The facilities department typically doesn't get involved with every capital project, only those that relate to county buildings. That makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Lisa or? Okay. Well, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Norma, as always. And thank you, Samantha Freilich, if you're listening. So now we're going to move on to the Highway Department and Highway Machinery Fund, and that can be found on pages 4-96 and 4-101 of your budget books. And I assume Jeff Smith is going to be presenting this. Hi, Jeff.
Hi there. How's everybody doing tonight? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see that?
No.
No. Okay. Hang on.
You should have hired Norma like everybody else did.
Well, the last time I did this was a year ago, and I have the only real nervousness I have about tonight is this part. And I did it last year and it just clicked really nicely. So, okay, we got it. I didn't give it time enough.
There it is.
And I believe you can see it now.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. See, that was easy. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. This is the highway and highway machinery budgets. You get two budgets for one in this presentation. looking forward to the 2023 budget. A couple of our major influences going on, and one that I'm just going to talk a little bit about. As you can imagine, the price of salt is on the rise. We just recently heard about the next year pricing coming in, and also gas and diesel. What we have witnessed, I don't want to talk about it at all, I don't have another slide or a graph for it, is this year price of asphalt and the escalation, just to put it in a little bit of a comparison or context. Normally over the summer, we may see a $6 rise per ton from the beginning of summer to its peak. This summer, it was going up a couple of dollars each month. And one time we actually had a $6 increase from the last day of July to the first day of August per ton. So it's been a little bit of quite a bit of balancing with our projects. Everything is going fine. We're just not getting maybe as far down the road or on the far end of our projects. We may have to cut some short, but overall it's going just fine. But it is something I wanted to bring about. The cost of raw materials is escalating. I'm hoping that it is a cyclic thing and it does come back to normal numbers. Looking back at the salt, just to give you a 5-year average, you're looking at a pretty steady cost of salt over the last 5 years. You can see the asterisk, the number 6140 up at the top. I didn't add that to the graph because we really haven't purchased it at that price yet. But we see a price, the top of the last graph at 2122 is what we're paying this last year was $52.90. We're getting an $8.50 per ton. This is reflected in the budget. We've added funding. We've added $43,000 to help us with that and keep our salted roads clean and safe. The next. Well, for some reason. Oh, look at that.
We're ahead of schedule. Take your time, Jeff.
I got it. The mouse acts funny. I'm on like the 2 split screens and I'm also talking to my laptop here, so I apologize. The next screen is 5-year average of gas and diesel. Again, you can see where we're really kind of going off the chart. On the left side is the price per gallon. So about 3.5 and about 4.5 is what we're paying this year for gas and diesel. We're really hoping that at least flattens out. But again, an influence in 2023 budget is we were able to pull another 75,000. We've had to transfer 75,000 already from our D fund to make it through the end of this year because we're incurring these costs. We don't expect it to get higher. It seems like things are kind of flattening out, but we have, as we keep saying, it's an influence in our budget. So I want to talk about it. The next slide is good news. It's always good to follow up that. Our system pavement quality annual, we rate all of our roads. It's a windshield inspection. The same personnel do it, so it's pretty relative from year to year what they're looking at. And they're rating it on a number of varieties of pavement qualities, ride, cracking, failure, different things, and they kind of get to the end and they give it a number, and then we have a pavement management system that we use that will, after we complete the survey of all the county roads, it kind of gives us a number back. And our latest number is 2021. We haven't rated them yet this year. We'll be doing it now in the next few weeks or months, and that number will get input. But like I say, it's good to see that steady increase, and this is very much attributable to our dedication to that. Our bond maintenance bond that we've had, the 15-year plan for highway, that's done a lot for this steady increase in pavement quality throughout the county. This brings us to the recommended budget for highway. And to be clear, highway machinery will be coming up in a few slides. This is highway budget. If you look at the overall budget, 7,712,000, it's actually gone down about $1,800. If you look at the revenue line for the 2023 target, that number, that $4,168,000 number, 4,160,000 of that is direct funding from the state through our program, what's called Consolidated Highway Improvement Program, more commonly referred to as CHIPS. If you're ever in a position to be able to advocate, support, discuss the need for this program, it's a statewide, all villages, cities, towns, all highway departments receive. It's a factored calculation based on a lot of miles of road and things like that each county has. So it's a relatively fairly distributed number. Our statewide county and our statewide town associations do a lot of advocacy with our representatives in Albany to make them aware of this program. And like I said, it's hugely important, as witnessed here. It's our biggest source of revenue. The balance of the 8,000 or so is some insurance recoveries and sale of scrap culvert pipe and things like that. Full-time equivalents for highway is remaining pretty steady. It's 34.9. If you look to the left, the 2020 number is this budget has been presented a number of different ways. I verified before the meeting tonight that number is a combination of our highway machinery and highway number. And then from 21 forward, we were presenting two different slides. So there'll be a slide coming up a few slides from now that'll show the highway machinery FTE chart. So we're not looking for any more, zero change, 34.9 people. And brings us to our highway machinery budget. As witnessed in just before now, the capital plan, there's now funding coming into the capital plan that's taking our highway machinery equipment and putting it in a capital plan. And all of our pickups are going through the green sustainable green fleet program. So that shows pretty big impact here, reduction of needed funding to get through the year for highway machinery. That's why you see the 22 modified. It's about $1 million. Got it right here. It's about $1.2 million less than last year. And that is really the reason for that is our equipment and pickups that we were purchasing for the department. It's now in the capital program. And the full-time equivalents, as I said, here it is, five straight across the board. And this is our senior mechanic, heavy equipment mechanic, and equipment service technician. And that's it. It's a very crisp presentation.
It's the crispiest. Thank you.
And open for any questions. And that's the view I get when I walk into work. Not every morning, but most mornings. And it's a very nice place to come to work every day.
That is nice. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for sharing that. Does anybody have questions for Jeff? Lee.
Maybe it's more of a question for Lisa. Just for the new guy again. Could you explain the interfund transfer and how that gets replenished, and the fact that, we show it net local basically at zero, but somewhere there's a contribution going in from somewhere.
So the interfund, there's a contribution to the D fund and there's a contribution to the DM fund. And those two funds, then those go into the interfund revenue within each of those functional units, 5010, 5110. So the DM fund funds the machinery, and the D fund funds the road. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and that's in the capital, and it's being drawn out to support the budget each year. Is that how
That's
you would?
so that's the general fund. So that's the A fund. So the A fund.
Not capital, general.
Right. The A fund funds the D fund and the DM fund and the CT fund and
But
all.
there's
those.
an ongoing general fund contribution that creates those, and then you're drawing from.
Right, it's basically revenue coming from the A fund. Yep, from the tax levy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mike,
So Jeff, what's the change in the pickup trucks that are going to make them part of the green plan?
Well, we're able to purchase we're looking at other models. We're not necessarily stuck on Ford F-150 Lightnings, but those seem to be the most conversed about as far as replacing other F-150 half-ton pickup trucks. As we move forward with other vehicles, and I know Terry's also been working, with us a lot, and we're looking at other model vehicles and things. If we get into the heavier pickup trucks, we may have to look at more of a hybrid. And I can't necessarily speak to them. I know that the pure electric vehicles aren't necessarily at that point of the heavier vehicles. We need to, equip them with plows and things like that. But I know that basically as we move forward and technology does start to get into these larger vehicles, we're going to be always looking at that and trying to work through our green fleet policy to see which level of vehicle we're going to be. Is one going to do our job that we need to do, keep the roads clean and things like that. Our winter snow and ice equipment's very vital. And these pickup trucks, these heavier pickup trucks do some of that. So we want to be careful as we step forward. But the only level that we're going full electric on at this time is the comparable vehicles. But right now we're calling them F-150 Lightnings.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Yeah.
okay, anyone else? Crispness pays, Jeff. You're off the hook.
I love it. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good evening.
Good night.
All right, so next up, we have facilities. And that can be found on page 4-71 of your budget book. And is Arel here?
Yes, good evening.
Hi, Arel, how are you?
Oh, good. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so this is the budget for the facilities department, our operating budget. Lisa earlier discussed capital projects, so this is going to focus only on the operating budget review. Our department maintains 14 roughly county buildings, which are listed here. We do not have direct maintenance responsibility for the airport crash fire rescue buildings, I think as was noted earlier. I didn't include the buildings that the county has recently purchased, that we do some light maintenance, but not at the level that we maintain these buildings, nor have I included the leased properties that typically are maintained by landlords, such as the DMV and the departments that are housed at the Center Ithaca. This is a graph that I've done for many years, but the last couple of years I've not included, but basically it looks back, this one is 15 years, looks at building areas maintained, annual maintenance costs, and then square feet maintained per maintenance person. And so on the far right, we have roughly 416,000 square feet that are maintained. We spend about 310,000. This is materials and contracts. It does not include our internal labor. And then the square feet per maintenance person is about 43,000. Back in 2009, along the lower, we were maintaining about 57,000 square feet. So the change is either a slight reduction in square footage, either buildings that we no longer own, or a slight increase in maintenance staff. And you see in the far right, the back 686,000 back in 2009. That was before we had a capital account, the facilities restoration capital account that Lisa reviewed earlier. And so a lot of those large expenditures had to come out of our operating budget. That no longer happens. The recommended budget shown here, the target was $4,221,000 with an OTR of 234,000 for a total of 4,456,000, which is about a 2% increase from prior years. And then revenue is a decrease in 65,000. That revenue, that 42,000 is interdepartmental charge for solid waste. Being an enterprise fund, they reimburse us for maintenance of their facilities. Full-time equivalents, no change from 23 target to what's being recommended. So it's 33.5. The half FTE is a seasonal worker that works just during the summer, doing landscaping and grounds maintenance. And 2 over targets, a more significant one is OTR 58. And I have a little description there. So that accounts for increases in electric, natural gas, water, taxes, rent, as well as property insurance premiums for newly acquired properties. So the breakdown is shown below that. Most of it is between electric, heat, and insurance, with minimal ones for water, sewer, rent, and taxes. Our department pays the rent for several departments, DMV, the Board of Election storage up on Hanshaw. We pay for rental of parking spaces for Human Services Building. Among the rent, human rights and assigned counsel rent is covered by our department. And just $200 increase dollars in taxes for a total of 233,216. The other over target is just to bring us up to livable wage for that halftime seasonal worker that I mentioned before. And those are the only 2 over target requests that we have. And that's my budget presentation. If you have any questions for me at this point.
Thank you, Arel. I think Rich John has a question for you.
Thank you. Arel, on your slide where you had your full-time equivalents, you went from 32 in 2022 to 33.5, but you talked about the halftime, but there appears to be another addition of a full-time.
Right, hold on. Right, from the 2022, from the 32 to the 33.5.
Yeah.
So the half is for the seasonal. The full-time is we created, well, we had not funded a cleaning operations supervisor for some years. That position was filled late last year when we consolidated our cleaning operations from day and night shifts to just day shift. And so we filled the cleaning operations supervisor position that had been vacant for several years.
So that wasn't to replace the FTE that you lost between 21 and 22.
This one was a reduction, and senior cleaner. So we had a senior cleaner for the night shift. When we went to day shift, we only retained our day shift senior cleaner.
Okay. I understand Rich's confusion though, because increasing from 32 to 33.5 doesn't exactly translate into a 0% change.
So there's a discrepancy between the slide and the FTEs in the book, which reflect 33 to 33.5 between 2022 and 2023.
Okay, thank you. Mike Sigler.
I was just wondering about the electricity over target. I mean, we get a lot of our electricity from gravity, right? And
Right.
that would be pretty stable. Is that mostly because of the delivery charge has gone up, or?
A little bit of that rates, delivery charges, but also the agreement that we have with Gravity Renewables is whatever they generate, we have to pay for that. There is no cap. There was a cap in the early years for I think 3 or 4 years. But now especially that it's been very wet this year, we pay whatever they generate. And so we've seen increases in our electric costs, but also what we're taking into account as we're starting our green facilities project phase 1. We're also switching off of some gas in some of our buildings and increasing our electric usage. So it accounts for those increases as well.
I don't understand though. I mean, if we were getting 60% of our electric from Gravity, and then this year maybe we got 100%, I don't understand why there would be more. I mean, we're just paying it to somebody else. We're not, you know what I'm saying? We're not paying it to NYSEG then for that 40%. We're paying it to Gravity. So why wouldn't that just be in the regular budget?
Well, the percent that we're getting from, as I said, from Gravity Renewables, if it exceeds, let's say, what we are using from NYSEG, we don't, so we don't get that net, the net reduction in our NYSEG bills. So it's not a large portion of it. As I said, a larger portion of it is we're going to be going to more electric usage than natural gas in the coming years as we green our facilities and get off of natural gas.
So what you're saying is that we have to pay Gravity for everything they generate, whether we actually use it or not?
Correct.
Okay, and Gravity is the thing up in Waterloo, the
Yes.
dam? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. I guess we could have done a better job. Yeah, I have Mike Lane, Annie, and Rich John.
It is.
Oh, okay, Rich.
Take Rich first.
Okay, go ahead.
Is there somewhere else in the budget, a revenue line? Like that, if that electricity is generated, are we selling it to somebody else because we're buying it from Gravity? Or does it just go away? Who gets the value of that extra electricity that we're paying for if we're not using it?
Well, they're only producing electric for the county. They don't have any other contracts with any other entities. And so whatever.
It goes out on the grid though, right?
Well, so there's net metering, but let's say if they produce, for example, 100,000 and our utility bills only add up to 80,000, that additional 20,000, my understanding is it doesn't roll over. It may roll over to the subsequent months, but it doesn't roll over year to year. Jonathan Wood, that knew the agreement and the ins and outs of that when it was generated, the agreement some years ago. But as I indicated, in the first few years, there was a cap. And we would not, if they were to exceed that and overproduce, we would not pay whatever they generated. That's no longer the case and hasn't been that way for a few years now.
Oh, this might be something we want to look into because it seems extremely disadvantageous to us. So thanks, Rel. I mean, obviously, this is not something in your control, so not your problem.
But I mean, the plus side is as we're going more towards electric.
We'll use more.
Yes, we'll use more of those
Okay.
for the net metering credits.
Just as an aside, I read something today that y'all might be interested in about the cost of energy over this coming winter. It's gone up and is anticipated to go up about 35% over the last 2 winters. And the highest increases are for natural gas, whereas electricity is only expected to go up by about 7%, which is still 7%, but it's a lot better than the cost of gas. So I'm glad to see that we're making this additional commitment to electricity. Okay, I've got Mike Lane and then Annie.
Just a quick retort to that is that natural gas has been historically cheap, and that's why it's going up
Right.
fast. But Rel, I had a question. Please refresh my memory. You said something about it and I totally forgotten about it. What parking spaces are we leasing for Human Services building?
It's, excuse me, on State Street, Martin Luther King Jr. Street. It's just across from Human Services building, but it's the backside of Ithaca Fire Department.
Oh, yes. Okay. We have some spaces over there. All right.
There are 18 spaces.
That answered my question. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Annie.
Thank you. I was, part of my question, one of my questions was answered because I was gonna say that, or ask if, as we're going and switching to more electric versus getting off of fossil fuels, if we wouldn't be able to use up more of those credits. So it's good to have those credits, I believe, and hopefully we'll use up more of them, but that's something that we could look at. I had a question on your slide, that the last slide that you had up regarding heat. Maybe perhaps you said it was heat. You had electricity and then heat. Was heat meaning gas?
Yes, yeah, in our budget account lines for the county budget, the heat is where natural gas is charged out of. I'm not sure why, but that's the account name for that.
That's the account name. Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else with questions for Arel? Seeing none, I guess, Arel, you get the rest of the night off.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and now we will move on to the airport. Hi, Roxanne.
Good afternoon or good evening. I'm gonna share my screen here, maybe.
Okay, I'm sure you will.
Can you see that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. So, thanks everybody for, getting together for this lovely presentation. So the airport, what's been happening? Of course, my thing's not working. Today, we're at 2 airlines with 3 flights. Back in 2019, we had between 7 and 9 flights. And at the beginning of 2020, we had 8 flights. And then went down to 2 with the pandemic starting. So these are some of the things that we're dealing with. We have an increased cost for our law enforcement officers at the airport. The mandate from TSA is we have to have somebody at the site when passengers are being screened. So they reduced the amount of funding. The cost of the sheriff is about 270-some thousand per year. And we're now only getting back about 58,000 from the TSA. The sheriff does help out and use part-timers when they're available. It cuts the cost overall to the airport, but it's still a large increase in our airport budget. With the loss of American Airlines, we lost that revenue, but it also decreases other revenue across the board, reduced fees that we get, from parking, from the cafe, that also is affected. The future, what we need to do, we need to get additional and new service. This is something that the airport's currently working on, has been working on, and will continue to do so. Increasing our non-airline revenue. That's something that we're already in the process of as well, by looking at the parking rates that we're charging compared to other airports, trying to factor that in. General aviation opportunities, we're working closely with Taganic Aviation to, build a better relationship and increase, the rates that we can get from them. And we're also taking a look at all of our contracts to see where we stand, not only with our expenses, but our revenue, what we can do. And we've already started factoring this in, with an off-airport rental car fee that we can charge. Bill, Troy, and I are working on finalizing that information. One of my goals, after everything that's happened over the past year, relating a lot to the pandemic, is really a recovery plan to a sustainable airport. This is something that I think is critical. I think it needs to be on the forefront of, not only what I'm doing, but what other people, are looking at and thinking about is, I'm going to need help. I realize that, the county, the airport, the Air Service Board and the community, our educational institutions, local and state representatives, needing to work together. And again, as I stated a lot of this earlier, some of the next steps are steps that we've already been working on, but we need to continue to work on, and delve into farther. As you can see here, here's the history of our emplanements. This is something, as we were talking, the passenger facility charges, the PFCs. Those are things that we need to cover, the capital project, the 5% portion, the debt service that we have on the terminal expansion. So as you can see in 2019, we were at almost 110,000 in passengers. In 2022 year to date, I think this was through July, we're at about 30,000. So, we're slowly increasing, but we need to work harder, with our airline partners to get additional flights. It's not that we don't have the passengers, the capacity, or the market to fill the aircraft. It's just we need the additional aircraft. We need the airlines to recover and, give us that opportunity. Just a quick little show of some positive news here. It's our Part 139 inspection. We've had 3 years with 0 discrepancies, and it, looks at everything from paint marking to, the taxiways to the training. So, a lot of the FAA projects that we do factor into this, and then we have to have them, 100% to make sure that we are in compliance. The Legacy Cafe, they started just about a year ago in the terminal, and what an amazing, group of people to work with, amazing customer service, and the food is top notch. So if you haven't had a chance, please come and visit them. It'll help them continue to operate as well. Here's a recommended operating budget. You can kind of see where we're at, and what we're asking the county for assistance with. To begin the road to recovery. This isn't going to happen overnight. It's probably not going to happen within a year. I put together a bunch of information on, what my thoughts are, what some other individuals I've reached out to and how we can achieve this. We're looking at, help to cover 50% of the debt service and, money to cover some of our operating expenses in order to keep our airline rates and charges at a competitive rate. We can't, increase their fees so high that we end up knocking out a chance of getting additional service because the costs are high. We're trying to keep our CPE, our cost per employment, right around $20. And by, the county, if they're able to assist us with this, we will be able to do that for our 2023 budget. Our customs facility, again, this is showing a loss. Right now, we're working hard, and I understand the concern people have with the loss. I'm a numbers person, so I get it. I look at, a loss is a loss. But, I'd really like to ask the support for this so we can work to market this facility along with overall general aviation traffic. We haven't had the opportunity to fully get the information out there. And again, we're working with Gigantic Aviation, and it's something we can also factor into a recovery strategic plan because it does provide benefits other than direct revenue to the airport, travel and tourism, sales tax revenue, and it gives additional, revenue through Gigantic Aviation with the sale of fuel. Our full-time equivalence has remained the same at 15. Over target request. So this is the first time the counties, really had to hopefully assist the airports. The first time the airports had to come to the county with this type of request. And it's not something I take lightly, but looking at this, we need assistance to ensure that we can continue to operate, that the airport can be operational, that we can be competitive, and keep the flights in and out of Ithaca. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Roxanne. So questions? Lee?
I might not have been paying close attention when you started. You said 2 two airlines and three flights early on. Is that 3 flights a day?
Correct. Yep. 2 airlines. So we have one on Delta to Detroit and 2 on United to Newark.
Okay. And the other question was, looking at that 2019, and just for my own education, and anybody that's out there listening, where did you peak on the number of flights per day? How many did you have coming in here at our best?
At our best, there are times where we had anywhere between 10 and 12 a day.
Thanks.
Sometimes more depending on the time of the year. But I think 12 was probably the maximum amount that I remember. There may have been some years where we may have had, part of a year had a few more, they made adjustments, but I would say 12 was usually about a good number.
So you got a potential to go back there someday if the airline industry can recover.
Absolutely.
Maybe
Absolutely.
better. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, I've got Annie and then Rich.
Thanks. A follow-up question to what Lee was asking regarding the 10 to 12 flights a day at the peak. That was just what, 3 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago. Is that correct?
Correct.
We
Yep.
were ramping up after the renovations and expansion at the airport is what I remember.
Yep.
And if I'm remembering correctly, most of those flights were pretty full and economically viable for the airlines, correct? And then COVID hit. So is that correct, my memory of that?
Absolutely. So the flights were generally full. 90% of the time we would have, anywhere between 70 and 90+% load factor, which is, a very good load factor for airlines, profitable for airlines because a lot of the flights weren't going directly point to point. They were going beyond, going international, going, to other destinations, which were revenue generating for the airlines. So that was, the case. And, we were anticipating getting up to about 150,000 passengers with our market that we have and the capacity. That's what we were anticipating until COVID hit.
And then with, last question, I think with most recently, before losing American Airlines, the flights, I think you said most of the flights, if not all of them, were pretty full also. Is that correct?
Correct. American was having anywhere between 92 and 98% load factor on their flights before they ended their service. And that was into Charlotte as well as into Philly. They had good load factors to both airports.
So once we can get pilots and the airports, and I know, just wanted to comment that I know people were, a lot of us were pretty shocked that American, pulled out of here. And I read an article recently about how they not pulled out of San Francisco, but pulled out their operations, like their base there out of San Francisco.
Their hub?
Was it what
hub?
it's called, a hub? I mean, they still fly out of there, but they don't have their hub there. So it's real. So trying to get them to stay putting flights here is pretty hard to ask, but I appreciate everybody trying.
I've spoke with them numerous times. I'll have a call again, probably within the next couple of weeks. I do believe they will come back to Ithaca. They were profitable out of Ithaca initially, and this is just my own thoughts of reading and the information, because they did cancel a lot of flights out of Philly, in the fall. I mean, there was just, they're just cutting back because of the pilot shortage, the fuel costs and staffing, getting people to work. So they were, looking at that initially, I was thinking maybe 3 years. I'm going to try to be a betting person and say less than that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really sad because no matter how full we can fill those flights and how profitable we can make it, if they don't have pilots, there's nothing we can do. So, Rich.
I'll pass.
Okay. Anybody else? Greg.
Just go ahead. Sorry.
So, look, go ahead, Nick, go ahead.
Hi, Roxanne. Thanks for the update. So I don't normally like to ask this question, but I will, just because of the position that we're in at the airport. If I'm just looking at our full-time equivalents in 19 with over 100,000 employments, right? Am I saying that right? And then we're down to 30, but our staff, our FTE count has remained the same.
I can answer that very easily if you would like me to.
Yeah, please.
Okay, absolutely. So we are mandated to have, so the staff that we have here at the airport, myself as airport director. And then we have Cheryl, who's my assistant. She answers the phone. We have Tyrone in the terminal. And then we have our required staff as well that are mandated for airport crash, fire, and rescue. We have to have a minimum of 2 person per shift, and we run 2 10-hour shifts. So we have to have a minimum of 2. And Josh sometimes even has to fill in on that. He's the deputy director here and the fire chief. So we have to have minimum staffing per FAA requirements because we're a Part 139 certificate airport.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Travis, did you have something?
I do. Even before the pandemic, most moderate to low income folks had to travel to fly because they couldn't afford to fly out of Ithaca. It seems like there is a lot of money in this community that's not being spent here because of affordability. So as we come out of the pandemic, what are the thoughts on how to tap into those folks so that people fly local, so they can afford to fly local?
Travis, that's a great question. It's something that I'm working on to get a low-cost carrier out of Ithaca. It's not an easy thing to do at the time, with the pilot shortage and but talking to them so that there's affordable flights for families to be able to take vacations, whether it be a flight into Florida or, a flight someplace else south. So that's something that was, one of the key points when I applied for this position was to work on that so that, we could afford to fly leisure travel, not necessarily just business travel or educational institution travel. So that's something that I'm diligently working on. And, any information or support that you have or could send me would be great. I'm working on that.
Thank you.
Mike?
This may be off the wall, but I read an article about a new airport. I guess it's a terminal, maybe it's Boston or somewhere, where they're combining the general aviation operation with the actual airport operation. I wondered if you'd heard anything like that and whether that's anything we ought to be thinking about doing.
The struggle with doing that, there's a lot that factors into it is security wise. So when we have our commercial aircraft, which are cleared through customs at the airport through the TSA, they're not cleared through customs, sorry, I misspoke, cleared through the TSA, the Transportation Security Administration. A flight that maybe is coming, say, from a general aviation flight that would be coming in, say, from Boston to Ithaca, hasn't cleared through TSA. So they can't operate necessarily in the same area. I mean, they could operate, they could operate out of the same building. I think Binghamton is looking at doing that with their new terminal, combining the terminal into one space. But a lot of times the general aviation has a maintenance facility and they operate separately, because of the maintenance facility, the fueling that they do, and having needing the area that wouldn't have gone through TSA security clearing. So like right now, if a general aviation flight came in, they couldn't land and come through the terminal because they haven't been cleared through TSA.
I understand that, but it's interesting to hear about Binghamton looking to combine terminal usage.
I was looking at their grant application, and I think that's in there, Mike, because I was looking at when they had received the grant. I was just looking for other information on what the expansion was going to be at the other airports that got the grants, and I believe that's something that they were doing, or maybe building onto their general aviation as well. I'm not sure. I'll look into that and I'll let you know what I find out, Mike.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I have Shauna and then Henry.
So I want to thank Roxanne and Josh. Deb and I have met a few times up at the airport and had some really great discussions.
And some good lunches.
And some very good lunches at the restaurant there. Cheesesteak, I would recommend.
Best cheesesteak in New York State.
Yeah, yes, incredible. And in talking with some of our business partners, also with some of our friends who might consider making a contribution to the airport, the feedback that I've been hearing is that we really need to focus on a strategic plan And so I'm working with Roxanne and Lisa to put forth an OTR that will provide a study for the airport. So I just wanted to give my colleagues a heads up on that.
Thanks, Shauna.
Thank you, Shauna. Henry.
Yes, in terms of the custom facility, we know that there's a lack of pilots dealing with the PFCs in terms of flights. What's the rationale for the losses for the custom facility?
So with the customs facility, so they were new, they opened right after the pandemic. And, we were anticipating we do get, international flights for, students going to Cornell or, other international flights coming in for business purposes. Then, the international flights, were shut down and people weren't traveling as much. So we really need to, look at the information because this is something new, as far as the customs facility for the airport. And trying to, so we have a person here and just trying to make sure that we get the information out there that it's here. People can come here and clear customs without having to stop at White Plains. So this is all for general aviation aircraft through our customs facility. It's nothing commercial at the time. So that's something that we're working on, trying to, hopefully increase the international travel, people coming in. They would come here instead of stopping at White Plains, fuel up, give us additional revenue there as well.
Okay, thank you, Roxanne. Does anybody have any other questions for Roxanne? Okay, thanks, Roxanne.
Thank you. Have a great night, guys.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Okay, we got one more. We've got the History Center. And I see Ben. Hi, Ben.
Howdy. Can folks hear me and see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. I'm going to start off with an apology to Dominic that I probably ruined the template that went out. I did my best, but I am maybe not the most technologically competent. So our 2023 target of 47,988 is about 13% of our operating budget. It represents a small increase over the previous year. This is largely consistent with the percentage of our operating budget that the county has provided going back decades, which is that 13%. You will notice in your books, though, that we have an OTR request of $12,012. That $12 is really just to make the overall number a round number for my sanity. And that would increase the overall percentage to 16%. When I get to the end of the slide and I have the actual table up, I'll talk a little bit more about that OTR. We've maintained our COVID staffing levels, which is one staff position down from 2019. So we have 5 full-time positions and 1 2/3 position. Although we are looking for ways to restore that position that we're down, because we do feel it operationally here at the museum and in our research library, I'm hesitant to add it back in until I know that I can financially support it in the long term. That kind of certainty has been hard to come by during COVID. Our budget, largely in addition to the money provided by the county, pulls on individual giving, grants, foundations, state, federal agencies, and fundraising initiatives. Our fiscal year runs July to June, and we ended this past fiscal year 21-22 with an operating surplus of $46,000. We had planned with a slight deficit, but our surplus last year was driven by several bequests that came in at various times during the year. You can see this year we've also projected a deficit of about $12,000. It is largely grant and fundraising dependent. We similarly have done this each of the years that I've been here at the History Center, where we've had a slight deficit, and then each year we have delivered a positive bottom line. So I think it is about projecting income conservatively so that we can be confident in if we see sort of a worst case scenario. I will say that we remain susceptible to future shocks, things like COVID that are hard to predict and that reverberate through our income streams, and that the county's flexibility to work with us both individually and as a group here at the Tompkins Center for History and Culture has really made a difference over the impacts of COVID. Some quick programmatic highlights for us. You all have heard me come and talk about our History Forge digital application that we're pioneering here at the History Center. We recently were just awarded a significant funding grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities to take that project into its next phase. And in addition to receiving that funding, it was also awarded special recognition as a More Perfect Union project, which spans across grant programs and across cultural entities at the federal level, and unlocks cool opportunities for us with the History Forge application. This next phase for us is bringing it to the entirety of Tompkins County, which we've already started into Caroline and into Newfield, but also into other parts of the country. And so we are targeting groups in California, in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, and other parts of the South to bring this application that we're pioneering here to more historical entities in the United States. And it's, I think, helping put us as a community on the map in the way that we think about local history. We also got to open up a new exhibit, Recount Facing Our Census. If you haven't had a chance, we did it in conjunction with the National Archives, releasing the 1950 census information. If you haven't had a chance to visit us yet, the months are ticking down because we will be opening a new exhibit soon. So make a trip down to visit us. We are free to everyone to come on in. So we hope to see you soon. And then we also have returned to a lot of our in-person programming, things that we were able to safely do outside, like guided walking tours and that kind of stuff, have been easier to return to, though we are just sort of reintroducing more of our indoor programming. And I think our next one coming up is we have Penny Minner coming to do a workshop on cornhusk doll making that we're real excited about and has really been a favorite over the last couple of years. A specific program that I wanted to highlight because it was funded through the Tompkins County Tourism Program was our Vintage Baseball Showcase. We have a history of baseball here in Tompkins County that is broad, diverse, and deep, starting in the 1850s. And we brought two teams to play vintage baseball here. Using the information from the tourism department on generated stay, the grant money was about $5,000 for marketing, and the economic impact of that was around $27,000. It generated 160 out-of-county visits, and I think was a real example of how you use local history to generate travel and engagement in a local community. And we're excited to continue to grow this in partnership with our tourism partners. I also wanted to highlight, because this was emotionally important, we had paused all of our in-person field trips to the 8 Square Schoolhouse. For those of you who grew up in Tompkins County, we are on the verge of getting third-generation Tompkins County residents through that program. So grandparents and parents, and then now their kids. If you grew up here, you may have paid a visit to that program, and we brought it back in person for the first time last spring since COVID, and it was the biggest spring we've ever had in terms of the number of fourth graders we were able to invite to experience a day in the 1890s. So that was, I think, emotionally important for us at the History Center. Our museum visitor numbers to the actual exhibit halls are still 66% of where we were pre-COVID. It's been trending upwards, but we see it peak and dip depending on the local impacts of COVID-19. As we are admission free, that, you know, we don't plan on revenue from admission tickets, but we want to keep encouraging and having as many folks come through our door as possible. When COVID spikes or dips in our community, we notice it in terms of the folks coming through the door. Another piece that has really exploded for us was the amount of folks we are serving with research visits and research requests. Some of that is pent up demand, especially in the last 2 or 3 months. We've noticed a lot of folks traveling from out of state and out of county to come spend time going through our archives and our collections. But that even locally, we are trying to serve more folks with more questions about what has happened here in this place we call Tompkins County. Looking forward, we have 2 exhibits opening in calendar year 2023. Not So Fast, Patchwork of Tompkins County, that looks at quilts and crafting in our community. And then in the fall, September 2023, A Sporting Chance, which is about sports here in Tompkins County. I noted the expansion of History Forge, and then we will continue to offer programs, book talks, lectures, presentations, all kinds of workshops, trying to get more folks to engage with more parts of our local history. And then that third bullet point down there, it is a point that we are actively working on. We are being asked to preserve more things on behalf of the community, and that requires space. And so we are looking for spaces that can meet both our preservation needs, but also a way to continue to bring in more folks to engage with the stuff that we're preserving. We have an incredible public space here at the Tompkins Center for History and Culture with the museum, the research library, all of our nonprofits and partners in the building, but that we need to be able to find some space that is more like a warehouse for us to be able to preserve and maintain artifacts that tell the story of what it means to be humans here in Tompkins County. That 2023 OTR is specifically to bring our bookkeeper up to full-time in this coming year. And that full-time request is specifically to help manage and implement a rental program for the TCHC space. Right now, that falls on my already full shoulders, and I am trying to respond to increased rental requests for spaces, for events, for receptions within our building, and just simply not able to do it in a way that does it justice or provides or meets the vision, I think, of when this project started in the mid 2010s of making it a space for all kinds of groups in the community. And part of this is specifically with an eye towards the convention center that is opening up. We anticipate the need and the desire for a space like ours when groups start coming in. And we want to make sure we have the systems and the practices in place to be able to rent our space. And it's fashioned here as an OTR because this initial 1-year investment should generate an income stream that will support these hours in the future. And if it doesn't, then we have to come back and look, okay, is this actually worth these expanded hours, or can we cut back on those and rethink what it means to activate this space? So I think that, yep, that's explanation of the OTRs. And then I'm happy to take any questions from any of the legislators.
Thanks, Ben. You've been very creative, and that's nice to see. Let's see. Lee has a question, then Mike Sigler.
Question and maybe a quick follow-up. Ben, about how much is the History Center's annual budget from all sources?
Yeah, so our income, I've got my Excel sheet here. Right now we're looking at about 363,000 in income and 375 in operating expense for fiscal year 22-23, which gives us that $12,000 projected deficit. Some of that, I will say already, has changed significantly because of the NEH grant that I mentioned. That with that grant, we now have, for instance, $50,000 in programming expenses that are offset on each side that we would not have incurred if we didn't get that grant. So, during COVID, it has been continuously revisiting with my board. Okay, here's our new projected of where we go from what we had adopted at the start of our fiscal year.
Thanks. My point in that is that we're less than $50,000 contribution out of a $350,000 or $360,000 annual budget. And my disclosure, I'm village historian in Groton, and I have a lot of admiration for the work they do at the History Center, and they've come a long way since I was working with the Witt Historical Society. And Ben, we thank you for the programs you've done for us out our way.
Yeah, Ben's terrific. Mike Sigler.
Hi, Ben. I just have two questions. You want to bring events into the center? I didn't know if there was any consideration of maybe putting a commercial kitchen in there.
Gosh, if you can help me figure out the rebuild, it has been a clear need for us here. Especially a lot of the inquiries we're getting are around weddings and those kinds of receptions. And especially when we have these large scale exhibits, I'll put some of my cards down on the table here. When we have our sports exhibit, I'm hoping that we can get some of our current sports teams to come and have programs and events there and learn about, what people were doing for sports and recreation in the 1700s, 1600s, going back generations, but then also what people were doing 100 years ago. So I don't know if we have the space. I think we will always have to cater that out.
You need a dedicated food truck.
I think our county has some food trucks.
Yeah.
Well, that brings me to my two other questions. How did the baseball game go, and how did your bike ride go?
The baseball game was great. We had over 300 people come for a first time program. The model for this event is what Gettysburg does, and they have this year, I think they had 43 teams travel from across the Eastern Seaboard playing all kinds of historical baseball. And it's just a cool way for people to engage with history and understand how much programs change. So we're hoping to build on that first year's audience. And the little picture in the slide there was of our marketing approach. We made packs of Tompkins County baseball cards that were given out for free at local stores and businesses, both in Tompkins County and our surrounding counties. So we are definitely targeting out-of-county visitorship. And that was another great way to be able to share some of our local history with a broader audience and then bring them to come engage with that at a program. So we were thrilled with how that turned out. And then the bike ride that Mr. Sigler is referring to this weekend as a fundraiser for the History Center during COVID times, I've gotten folks to make pledges of cents per mile that I could bike in a 24-hour period. And so the first year it was a little haphazard, but we raised a couple of $1,000s. And then last year and this year, we were much more concerted with the historical way we were approaching it. So our theme last year was finding fires. And so we looked at historic fires there was earlier on, someone mentioned Podunk, and there's a great arsonist case and house fire up in Podunk that was my favorite piece of history we learned last year. And then this year was facing floods. And so on Saturday from midnight to midnight, I biked 250 miles. We raised almost $14,000 for the History Center. And we are super appreciative of everyone who donated, and ServPro of Broome, Tompkins, and Tioga County came through with a sponsorship of $10 per mile that I could ride, which maybe doesn't sound like much, but you do 250 miles and it adds up.
Wow. You're a treasure, Ben. Okay, I've got Greg Mezzi and then Mike Lane.
Thanks, Ben. I think that's fantastic. I mean, I think when you're willing to but you grind it out like that and raise funds, it really shows your commitment to the work that you do. So it's always nice to see when people are making a personal investment in their work like that. So thanks for that. But it does bring me to my question. you said that this year, are you projecting, or last year you had a surplus of 24,000 that then goes into a fund balance or reserve fund, or?
Yeah, so we have an endowment. And so, I never like to include in my operating budgets planned bequests that feels like I'm rooting for somebody to die. And so, every couple of years, we will get a larger bequest that gets socked away into an endowment.
Okay, so you don't pull out of that to cover, like this year, you're gonna have a $12,000 deficit. Is that what the OTR is meant to cover? Or is it in addition to the OTR?
No, so that deficit does not include either the OTR it doesn't include the OTR on the income or the expense.
Okay.
So that covers additional hours that we would be adding in. And I say pretty confidently, because this has happened every year since I've started, we won't actually end with that 12,000 deficit. We will end somewhere from $0 to $15,000, $20,000 surplus, which is what I've delivered year over year.
Thank you.
Okay, Mike Lane and then Rich John.
Hi, Ben. Wondered about the Tompkins Center. How's the governance going over there, and are the spaces all full?
I've got a waiting list that's 6 or 8 organizations deep. We're short on square footage. We meet regularly as a governance committee, and I'm hoping that we're going to be able to get back to in-person meetings. We're still doing them by Zoom, and it feels I think we're still navigating COVID for us. So, for instance, we just changed our operating and cleaning agreement for the facilities because we've noticed an increase in usage and people in the building, and that where we were in cleaning wise was not meeting that sort of what we were seeing in terms of usage. But I would say largely we're all getting along, we're collaborating. It's really nice to see a lot of the groups working together, whether it's us in Discover Cayuga Lake or it's the Cap Gallery and the Visitor Center. That dream, I think, at the outset of this project of bringing all of these partners together in this space, because it fosters collaborative programming, it allows you to eliminate some overhead and save on expenses. I think we're realizing that, but I feel like you probably all hear this a lot. We're still trying to figure out what happens next with COVID and what the reverberation of those impacts are going to be. And so I feel like it's good news, but I've learned to temper my optimism.
That's a very optimistic report, and we thank you for that.
Okay, Rich.
And just to confirm, the bookkeeping position, Ben, is split with Historic Ithaca as well. And a little history on the History Center, that we funded the bookkeeping position in part because the History Center is taking care of management of the building for the county. And so it really does make sense that we have somebody whose job it is to make sure that all of the organizations in the building are contributing as they're supposed to, and that it's tracked well. Is that a fair statement, Ben?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, Shauna.
Yeah, I just wanted to see, I know that we wanted to offer a certain rate for the nonprofits that are being housed in this building. However, are the rates being charged enough to cover the cleaning costs and the maintenance costs for the building?
Right now, yes, but we're sort of looking at, I know there was talks earlier from facilities about utilities, and the last 2 or 3 of those have been higher than anticipated. I would chalk up to Jason that the previous administrator that some of this, there was a cushion. So, there's no worry of not meeting any of our expenses, but that is something I'm keeping an eye on. And especially, was it Deborah? I forget who mentioned the upcoming winter costs of energy. That'll be something I'm definitely keeping an eye on, and will likely come to report to the GO committee where I've reported in the past.
Okay, so is this something that would be built into their rent for the upcoming year?
Yeah.
Is that how it would work? Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else have any questions for Ben? Well, I don't see any. Thank you, Ben. You really are very committed and very creative, and we appreciate it.
I've got a great staff here.
And modest too. Okay, so have a nice evening. All right, everybody, we have now heard from all 58 of the budgetary units that our 2023 budget will support. And
Can we go through them again?
no, Mike, we can't. And you've all been exceedingly crispy tonight. I appreciate it. And we're going to take 5 or 10 minutes. Amanda.
Well, I just wanted to check in. So tomorrow night we have budget forum.
Which is virtual.
Is it? That was my question.
Yes.
People attending virtually? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And so we're going to take 5 or 10 minutes to transfer ourselves over to our executive session status in connection with which I will entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss budget matters that raise personnel issues with named employees. And I see Greg moved it. Can I get a second from Randy? Thank you. And all in favor? Okay.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
Travis Brooks, Randy Brown,
Yes.
Amanda Champion,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Henry Grandison. Henry Grandison. Rich John,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
Yes.
Mike Sigler.
Yes.
We have 12 ayes, 0 noes.
Yes. Henry Grandison is a
That's
yes.
13.
13 ayes.
Thanks, Henry. All right, we'll take a break until we're set up for executive session. Thank you, everybody.
Deborah, do you need me on hand for executive session?
No, sir, I do not. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. You all have a good evening.
You too.
Good night, Rick.